KID crew, welcome to the January edition of Table Talk. A great big thank you to Gandolfo's for providing our delicious lunch. And we cannot thank Classic Interiors enough for powering these important Table Talk conversations each and every month. Go give them a visit. They have gorgeous tables that are perfect for gathering your friends and family around to have your own important conversations. We have a lot to talk about. We're going to focus on where we've been, where we're at, and where we hope to go. We're really going to connect the dots as we examine these stories that are dominating the news cycle. But first, let's meet the incredible panel.
Hi, I'm Garth Hassel. I'm an advisor with Global View Capital Advisors and author of Keep Your Life, Plan Your Endgame, so loved ones stay loved ones.
I'm Sean Crystal, owner of 710 Spectrum here in Idaho Falls. We're Idaho's first full spectrum hemp shop. And, we've overcome a lot of challenges. We look forward to 2026 being an even bigger year.
Awesome. I'm Bea Lindsay. I'm owner of Healing Bee Massage in Rexburg, Idaho, which is also mobile, so it could be near Rexburg. And, happy to be here.
Merrill Page. I am a case manager, community supports worker for Answers LLC in Idaho Falls. And I'm also a musician. I am creating actually a musical based on the dangers of bullying called Bully Musical.
And right now, as we look at the climate, we're seeing a lot of impulsive behavior, a lot of anger, a lot of violence, and it seems as if people have sort of forgotten that it's okay to have a difference of opinion. So where do we begin? There's a lot to talk about. We're going to start, though, with what happened yesterday in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The protests are really ramping up over that ICE-involved shooting, and a lot of different opinions coming out as we look at the fallout from that. Governor Walz is in the hot seat. So let's start with you, Merrill. As you look at what's unfolding there, what lessons do you believe we can take that might help us build a better, stronger community right here?
My personal take on it is that the world seems to have less and less ability to look at perspective. One of the things that I teach in mental health is, if you take your hand, you look at it from a distance, you can see a lot of things around it. But if you pull it in towards your face, pretty soon you can't see anything at all. All that you see, because your perspective has been obscured by how closely you are viewing a specific thing. You lose the ability to see everything else around it. And I think that in part, that's what happens with the can't even speak today, the politicization of all kinds of things. And that when somebody says something that is outside your point of view, they are not willing to consider what's on the other side. And so they are so stuck in their own track, if you will, that they don't see it. I'll give you an example. A lot of people wonder, why do we have train tracks the way that we do? And it ties clear back to Roman times, where the gauge was set for the width of the chariot, which was the width of 2 horses. And as time went on, wagons would be fit into that and different things so that they would follow these paths, and eventually they put railroad gauges into them. To this day, we pretty much have the same railroad gauges. So even things like moving around rockets for the space program, they are moved on these railroads and are limited as far as how they are made so that they can actually be transported on those things. So people are the same way. We get locked into a path, and we fail to consider anything exists outside of that path. And it's a sad thing because, you know, you mentioned the thing that happened in Minnesota. You've got people that are very much conservative, hey, pro-ICE, pro-this, pro-that, and then those that are using the other side of the political agenda saying, this is, you're evil, you're doing this, you're doing that, and it's causing some terrible conflict. It's
A
sad.
lot of chaos, a lot of friction. Thanks for those good visuals. B, as you look at all of that chaos, you're the mother of a couple of young kids. What concerns you about what they're seeing as they grow up?
I'm noticing now that I'm regularly having to have those hard conversations of what happens if someone notices you're different, or what happens if you see someone that's different, and how can you still show them love, you know? And my daughter recently, she talked about a song that they learned at school, and it was saying that we know that we're different from each other, and you're proud to be you, and I'm proud to be me, and that can coexist together. And I think that's amazing that they're teaching that so early, because it's true. And if we can ingrain that, then we can grow up being those adults that can coexist peacefully with differences. And so I think it's also pushed me to be more responsible and more ahead of the curve in knowing how to teach those things and being a good example. I don't mind being wrong. I don't mind being different. And I think people can be proud of those things that make them unique, you know? And I think that we can still be kind to others, you know? And it's so hard. It almost sounds so cliche as you're seeing the world and there's chaos and it's like, be kind, you know? It sounds easy, but I think simply it can be. There are so many differences that people have, but sometimes those strengthen us. You know,
Yes.
we have different perspectives and we can learn from others. If people didn't wear different hats, we would all just be the same and we would not grow. And so hopefully that answers your question. I think it's difficult sometimes being a parent, not even just a mother in this world, and everything's crazy every day, you know. But just trying to keep principles simple for my kids lets them know that it can still be deep-rooted in simplicity when they're older.
I think you've hit on something that resonates a lot, because it's hard right now for parents to be able to shield their kids from things, because this news, misinformation, disinformation, images, it travels so quickly. But I love the simplicity of focusing on kindness, because it can really be such a game changer. Mm-hmm. Sean, how about you, as you're just seeing everything that's evolving in that level of anger that erupts quickly to violence?
You know, honestly, Meryl over here got me thinking on the perspective side. How much of that might stem from the device that so many of us carry around in our pocket, the targeted marketing and advertising? I mean, I see it regularly, how quick we look something up, and within seconds, it's advertised, it's sponsored, it's showing up more. It's almost fueling that mindset and that division, because if I'm set in my ideology and that's what I'm looking at, then I'm being fueled more of my ideology through Google, through AI, through other aspects of marketing and advertising, and that's happening across the board. So like you said, getting that hand closer to the face, we're looking at the device and that hand comes closer to the face because we're being told what we need to hear, what we need to see, based on our own ideology, what we look up, what we research. And so it creates that further division. Perhaps maybe the marketing company needs to start advertising the opposite of what we are looking at, and to open that mindset again and get us back to being able to communicate with each other.
You bring up such a great point, because one of the things that we're seeing an awful lot of is this new trend where people are literally cutting their family members and friends off over political views, religious views, ideology. And once upon a time, we were more inclined, I believe, to have those conversations. And now there are a lot of voices out there saying, nope, you know what? Protect your peace. Just shut it down and go no contact. I can't tell you the number of memes that I come across, 5 signs your family is toxic, 5 signs your mother didn't do a good job, how to go no contact quickly. I mean, we are getting away from what healing really is. And a lot of people are trying to sell the notion that silence equals healing, but it doesn't. In order to heal, we have to take some accountability and have those difficult conversations. In short, Garth, we have to get comfortable with the uncomfortable. And that's something that you have some experience in, talking to people sometimes about subjects that maybe at first might make them uncomfortable.
True, that is my job, to ask questions that people would not normally be asked. And just listening to the panel here reminds me how my observation is that mankind's greatest fear isn't dying or public speaking, it's to be wrong. Oh. And so you have this convergence of events. He mentioned the bleeping device in our pockets. Well, so, we've gone from a society that would dive into tomes like War and Peace to scrolling tweets. So there's this extensive shallowness, and since it's pervasive, it's very easy to align oneself in a way that you frame yourself as right and they're wrong. And that's, rather than earning a position of expertise, whether it be through degrees or title or experience, you can, like that, say I'm in this tribe, and I think that's kind of dangerous, because we knew the information age has unfolded, but I've never heard anybody with a straight face call it the wisdom age. So we have all this information, and it's kind of like politics. Why do politics exist? It exists because there's too much information to digest to really understand the issues. That's why we elect representatives. It's their jobs, especially in their committee assignments, to understand an issue deeply and then decide with that depth, apply it to law and legislation. But as the general public, we can never know what went into their vote, or what should have gone into their vote, I should say, because there should be some depth there. So we're operating super broad and not deep like I think we ought to. I was in a meeting with people, and we had time to speak freely. And my dad, when he passed away, I got his McGuffey reader, and I read a paragraph from the McGuffey reader to this group of adults. I said, after reading the paragraph, I said, "What grade level was that? What grade level is this McGuffey reader?" The lowest I heard from the audience was grade 10. It was 4th grade. So part of me says, well, are we really teaching our kids the 3 R's kind of thing? Because those 3 R's, especially the first one, the reading part, if you're not reading, you're not really thinking deeply. And recent research is showing that more people use AI, the less their brains actually, I don't know if devolve is the right word, but they're going backwards.
Right.
So all these things are kind of converging. And so when challenged with hard questions, rather than ponder a response, we're now in a society that we're trained to react.
Mm-hmm. You've brought up such a great point, and I believe it is helping us to really connect the dots between what's happening right now in so many of the stories that are dominating the news cycle. We often listen to respond. We're so used to getting information like that that we don't pause, we don't give it some thought, and the words just start flying out. And one of the things that I have been noticing is with the internet, and I love that you brought up there's a difference between information and wisdom. And wisdom, it's a priceless gift that keeps on giving. But here's the thing, as we look at what we see on social media, I mean, I can tell you, I've been in the media business a long time, been a journalist. We are governed by standards. We follow FCC guidelines, but we watch as people get on social media and they just let it all fly out. And some of those standards are now dropping. And a prime example of that is what we saw from the governor of Minneapolis, Governor Frey, as he basically just went on this loud, angry rant. And he said, as an elected official, he told ICE to get the F out of his country. And we're all watching that. And once upon a time, you wouldn't have seen an elected official stand up there in an official capacity and sink to that level of language. So I think that we're seeing that some of the discretion, some of the standards are going right out the window. And that's bringing with it some unintended consequences. B, what do you think of as you think about those standards and guidelines sort of going out the window?
I think it's really important, like the way we're communicating with people. So, and you can catch me up to speed too. I was recently just hearing about this whole thing in Minneapolis just this morning. Mm-hmm. And so if there's pieces that I'm missing, just fill me in. But I think you can have an opinion, right? And you can want to share it. But sometimes the way we do it, it can just have more harm.
Yes.
You know? And then especially showing lack of professionalism, it's hard for people to also take you seriously, even if they agree. Mm-hmm. And so I think just what you're saying, having those standards of vocalizing something, you can be strong about it, you can have your feelings, but do it in a way that can still be constructive and say why. I think people forget the why.
The why is so often left out.
Mm-hmm, because they're often reacting. They want something to happen. They want people to do things. You want to make people do things, but you can't change people. You can't just make things happen. You can do your part and you can influence, and that's where your words come in.
Yes.
And that's why it's so important to have those standards for yourself.
And to choose those words carefully. We are watching as things are different, and it's interesting because you see some of the trends on social media where standards and professional courtesy and respect is almost being labeled as old-fashioned and too stiff, and yet we are watching in real time what's happening, some of those unintended consequences of those guidelines that were meant to showcase respect going right out the window. Meryl, I know you had something you wanted to share on this.
Well, just listening to the various comments that have gone on is that I think you mentioned the word superficial, and I always think of the iceberg analogy. What we see as far as the iceberg goes is very limited as far as how deep it actually goes. And I think that a lot of what's going on is the superficial analysis, if you will, of various situations that are occurring rather than looking deeper into it and exploring, okay, why does this person have this opinion? Why do they feel this way? It's a sad thing, but I've been able to watch some of this shooting that occurred. And from one angle, it looks like the officer simply shot her to shoot her. The other, it's pretty apparent that she actually bumped into him, almost ran him over. And, when you're talking about a large vehicle, look at what happened the past New Year in New Orleans. A vehicle is a weapon
Right.
when it's used for ill intent. And so the officer from the other angle was justified in shooting. But once again, you've got, okay, which angle am I going to choose? What perspective am I going to look at?
And that's so true. That's why it's important to connect the dots and get the whole picture. But there's a lot of anger going on. Kristi Noem actually said, Merrill, stop using your vehicles as weapons. And I mean, that's good advice, because a weapon certainly can be turned into a weapon. Sean, how about you? As you heard the governor of Minneapolis stoop to that level, what went through your mind?
You know, for me, it touches on something I was actually reading yesterday. For many years in our country, we've kind of let the doors fly open for people to kind of just do what they want with no accountability to the action. And you touch on it again with that perspective, that angle, the way the media portrays, CNN versus Fox. From one angle, it looks like this. From another angle, it looks like this. Instead of, the independent journalist who typically tells the whole story of this is what happened, this is what appeared, this is what realistically happened. And so in this country, it seems like what's really happened is we've had a lot of bullies throughout the world that have fueled us with illegal immigrants, fueled us with drugs that have killed hundreds of thousands of Americans, and we had people that didn't want to push back against the bullying that we were receiving. And now that we've got a president that actually is pushing back against that bullying and doing something about it and trying to get us back on track, it's created a distrust or a divide in the nation, because we had a lot that have transitioned to accepting of the woke culture, and we've got a lot of people that have transitioned away from, hey, this is not the right path, this is not where we should be headed as a nation. And it's definitely created that divide between that viewpoint and the mindset of where our trajectory is.
Right. No doubt about it. Perspective is something that I think we have to talk more about. People get real dialed into their own perspective, but leaning in with a little curiosity can go a long way in helping us to find some common ground. Garth, as you watched a governor address the media and crowds in that way, was it at all shocking to you?
Yes and no. I mean, no, because we've heard it before. Yes, because it highlights the level to which our standards have dropped. That should simply be unacceptable. Here he is. He's the governor. Or no, he's the mayor. No, governor.
Mayor. Yeah,
He's
the mayor.
He's the mayor. Okay,
Yeah.
but of a major city.
Yes.
So a little decorum. You can be firm. You can express some anger. Reagan did it. Other leaders of state have done this. They all had to, without losing your mind, without losing your what's the word I'm looking for? Poise. And it's just a sad state of affairs. And I don't know why. I think there's a lot of people who are it's speaking to the lowest common denominator, which I guess if you're in an elected position, you could justify that. But I would think more people would say, you know what? Why would I vote for that?
Right.
Why would I? It's like, look, have a little intelligence in what you say and not just emotion, because we're driving things with emotion. And this comes back to the superficiality that you mentioned, is when that's all we take in. All we have to respond with is emotion. Because we can't respond with intelligence,
Right.
because the input wasn't intelligent. Mm-hmm. So the output's just going to be at the same level that we took it in.
And I also think that Mayor Frey was responding through his actions and his tone to what he thought people wanted. And we are seeing just this more angry behavior and people cheering for things that just are a slap in the face to humanity. And so I think that's an interesting part that I looked at. And I said, if he really thought that people would oppose that level of disrespect coming out of the mouth of an elected leader, he probably would have stopped short. Let's talk about Governor Walz. He's definitely in the hot seat with the whole fraud that just keeps going from bad to worse, more and more coming out about that. We know that it's one of two things: either it's incompetence or it's corruption. And it's really probably somewhere in the middle, a little corruption, a little incompetence. Nevertheless, it's enough that he has suspended his reelection bid. But he's taking a really firm stance right now and saying, hey, you know what? Nope, we're going to handle this in Minnesota. A lot of people today are talking about the fact that he got up there and he certainly didn't follow the same script as the mayor of Minneapolis, Mayor Frey, but he didn't really call for the kind of unity that you might expect in the midst of ongoing chaos and escalating protests. He said, don't give them what they want. But what was really clear in the way that he spoke is that he couldn't really get outside of his own political view to be the voice of reason to try and bridge the gaps that were leading to more and more escalation. So that, I think, is where I would love for us to go now. How do we individually, as we look at the deep divides and the anger and impulsiveness, how can we contribute to bridging those gaps and creating more peace and unity?
Honestly, I think the biggest one that I see is getting back to community interaction. You know, I grew up, I think I'm the youngest or close to the youngest in at the table today, and I grew up in a generation where I started out where I could go to my neighbor and ask for a cup of sugar or a glass of milk or something. And sometime in my lifetime, that transitioned, and now it's almost sketchy to go and knock on my neighbor's door. You never know if they're going to answer it with a gun or answer it with kindness.
Right.
And a lot of that has come to that disconnect of community. And I think, again, it goes back to the lack of trust, the being put in a position where we have to make a decision between family and neighbors or friends and politics or whatever. We see it with the fraud in our own state with the child care stuff. And I commend our legislature for taking action and freezing those funds until that's addressed and resolved. But that also is going to create another divide of, can we trust our child care providers now? You know, which child care provider is doing things right and which one might be ran by some gang that wants to take my children away, right?
Right.
But
A lot of
I
terrifying thoughts.
do really feel that we've had a community divide where we don't understand civility towards each other. We've become so disconnected in the last couple days with each other, or a couple decades with each other. And we need to find a way to bridge that gap, to get back to interacting with each other, being able to build that trust and development with our neighbors and our friends, and restoring and maintaining that.
Right. Talking to your neighbor in the driveway or over the fence, we certainly have seen a real change in the way that people interact with each other.
In my field of work, dealing with mental illness, one of the things that I have seen time and time again is that people don't know how to communicate anymore. He's mentioning what happened when he was growing up. When I was growing up, if I wanted to see a friend, I had to go to their house. I couldn't send a text. I had to pick up a phone, and there's a good chance that mom or dad is on the other end of that line listening in on my conversation. So I was going to be mindful of what I was talking about. But now there seems to be a barrier in that communication because people are so focused on their thumbs or playing video games or whatever, and the going out until it's dark or going out until it's 10 o'clock at night playing kick the can or whatever is gone.
Right.
Because you don't know what neighbor you can trust. You don't know that your child's going to come home safely. Though the element of trust is gone, the element of communication seems to be gone. And then you're mentioning what was going on with the mayor and the governor in Minnesota. It's now come down to shock value.
Yes.
What can I say that is going to elicit the biggest response, rather than what can I say to quell to bring down the temperature?
Absolutely.
Something I wanted to add too, because when you're asking your question, unity does not equal sameness. We don't have to be completely on the same page. And I think, Garth, you were mentioning AI too, right? And how, do you notice, like when you talk to ChatGPT, it's always like, oh yeah, you're right. And it completely agrees with whatever you're saying. And so the same ways that we're going on the internet and we're searching for a point of view or solutions to whatever problem, what we're looking for is usually going to be what we find.
I love
And
that.
so when we're
true.
engaging with people, especially those that have different opinions than us, it doesn't mean we have to completely agree or just, erase our family history or opinions, but just opening your eyes to a different point of view. And what we were talking about the mayor, there's so much influence that we have that as individuals, we don't want to incite violence. We don't want to incite anger. Anger is not going to solve anything constructive, or constructively. And just knowing that of yourself, the things that we're searching for, that we're seeking out, the people and relationships that we're trying to find, we should know ourselves enough not to limit ourselves and to branch out a little bit.
I love that. Because sometimes people get in their mind, honestly, ooh, I've got to just stick with everyone who sees the world the way I do. Other people's opinions are not contagious. You can stay true to who you are by still being willing to embrace other people with different views and lean in and understand. And, variety is the spice of life. And when we brainstorm and collaborate, really good things can happen.
Well, we are the United States of America, and by design, it was to push down as much authority as possible to the local level, to the people. And by having it's now 50 states, we have 50 laboratories where the people in this region can solve the problems that are most pressing to them in their way. And the next state can do it in their way, and so on and so forth. So we have that ability to be innovative. And then, a lot of times at the state leaders, for whatever subject it is, they have an association, they all get together and share ideas. So that concept is before us all the time, yet there's all this noise to try to erase all of that. And I think because there's probably forces at work very high up with tons of money, recognize that's a problem. I mean, our greatness as a country, because of where we were a melting pot, and we brought in all these ideas and the structure within which we can thrive. The individual has a level playing field. I mean, it's never perfect, and then we had bumps along the way for sure. But look historically, what country has thrived more than ours? And all these people crying out, they want socialism, but none of them ever lived in a socialist country.
Right.
And no one's trying to flee a country like ours to live in a socialist country. So it's just a bunch of noise. And so we have to, kind of return to real. There's a guy I know, Ryan Levesque, who's coined that phrase and writing a book called Return to Real, because there's so much inundation from bots and AI and fakeness. People don't know what's real anymore, but what we're doing right here, right now, is real.
This is real.
Yes.
And that's the whole concept that Table Talk is built upon, that when you gather around the table with people, break a little bread, and engage in productive conversation, magic really happens. Because who would have thought that once upon a time, this kind of conversation and communication wouldn't be the standard or the norm? So many people, I believe, are trying to erase this kind of real communication without understanding perhaps the unintended consequences. So I believe now more than ever, these kinds of moments where we really communicate in the real is so important.
I mean, you're right. I mean, this was the norm. You know, sitting around the table playing cards or having a meal or cribbage or whatever else. And sure, Uncle Bob might have got pissed off once in a while and stormed out and had a cigarette, but he came back to play cards and continue the discussion.
Right. It didn't result in somebody being alienated from the family. And we think about right after the election last year, all the stories that were all over about people being uninvited to Thanksgiving dinner, uninvited to Christmas, all because of the way they voted. And I love that you reminded us, I mean, this is what makes America great. The freedom. And often the people, it always hits me right here, the people who are speaking out and participating in that I hate America kind of trend are doing it all while benefiting from all the freedoms that we have right here.
Yeah.
Well, you know, America 250. It's our 250th anniversary, and we may still be a young country in the vast scope of things. But it's up to us right here and right now how that trajectory goes forward.
It's so true. And all of us here at KID News Radio and Rich Media are just so committed to driving this America 250 coverage because it's an opportunity to really remember who we are at our core and to get back to some of the things that really helped create strong bonds in families, in neighborhoods, communities, country, and that even spilled over into the world.
I got one other thought, you know, and sorry to twist this into a religious bent because this is not meant to be that. But, you know, we created our country based on Judeo-Christian ethics. And the one thing that comes to mind is the Beatitudes. And when Christ was asked, what are the great commandments? Love your neighbor as yourself was the second, right? He didn't say, love your neighbor if they believe like you do, if they look different than you do, if they have the same political values as you do. He said, love your neighbor. There was no stipulations made to it. And I think that is the thing that we've really gotten away from is, you know, regardless if somebody has a vastly different opinion than I do, he's still my brother. She is still my sister. And as a person, they deserve respect. Do I have to believe what they believe? No, but I can at least respect it.
Right.
You know, Meryl, you nailed it right there. We may be on different sides of the aisle in thought process and ideologies and stuff, but at the end of the day, if we can sit down and set aside differences and have real discussion, most of us have the same centered goal, and that's to better ourselves, better our communities, better our families and our friends.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said. I mean, there is that common ground, and there are things that are absolutely not partisan in nature. Compassion, humanity, respect. Those things are human attributes. B, how about you? What comes to mind?
So I just echoing what you're saying, it's respect and everything. It's not a privilege, right? That's a right. You're born with that. You should be able to be respected and to enjoy whatever you were born with. You know, we don't get to choose which family we're born into or the regimes we're born under or anything, you know. But actually talking, Meryl, what you were saying, it reminded me of a wonderful woman that I go to church with, and she was talking about a Thanksgiving dinner that they had, and she noticed that her brother, he seemed like really happy, but not sure if he should be happy, you know, and everyone's enjoying the dinner and everything's going really great, and afterwards when she's dropping him off, he asked her, so are we okay? And she's like, yeah, like I know we have differences, but yeah, we're okay, you know? And so he like literally is walking with a skip in his step and he's excited, right? And when she goes back home, some of her family members are like, wow, I can't believe that you reacted so well after that awful letter that he sent you. And she was like, what letter? And so she had gone back to read it, and she said she only read it once and just threw it away. But it was heartbreaking. It was really sad, you know? And it shows that sometimes when we're so emotional, it's a moment and then it's gone and you don't know those consequences.
Right.
But because she already forgave him and she said that to him and she's like, well, I'm not going to hold on to it. I already said I forgive you, you know, then we can continue being brothers and sisters. You know, we can go on peacefully.
I love that story. What perspective. You know, you're right. You bring up something important. Emotion is driving so much today. Think about, I like to call them nasty grams, the people, the keyboard warriors who sit down in a heated moment and fire off a very ugly and hateful response. Think about it. They would not say that to someone's face. They probably wouldn't even say it on the telephone. But because they have that anonymity of just being behind a keyboard and they don't see the look on someone's face when they say those hurtful things, I believe it's leading to a lot of what you're talking about, people just responding in anger and emotion.
Which engenders no respect whatsoever.
Right.
So when you're the recipient of that, you realize the person could have said so-and-so to your face, or better yet, said, I think Jefferson Fisher calls it, unravel a problem.
I like that.
So if you ever heard him, instead of arguing, because you're never going to win an argument, because if you win, you've lost the relationship. So he recommends, let's unravel this together. And I love that, because we're never going to solve anything just by launching word bombs.
And that really goes right to the heart of the fact that words matter. And words have the power to either build or destroy. And he's already, by just saying, let's unravel this together. That together component is so important, and it sets the tone for there to be some hope and healing.
You know, it makes me think of another video I just watched the other day, just a really short snippet. And it's kind of opposite in the spectrum, and goes in with what you were saying about these keyboard warriors.
Yes,
You know,
right.
and it's this video, this guy believes he's being followed by this truck behind him. And the two cars wind up going separate directions, and he rolls down his window and starts yelling vulgar things at the driver of this truck that he thought was following him. The driver of the truck then proceeds to come back to behind him and starts following again, and the guy just starts freaking out like, oh my God, oh no, what do I do? And it's like, well, yeah, you had the opportunity that things had de-escalated, the guy had gone a different direction, and you chose to re-escalate it. And then when it didn't go the way you anticipated because you just wanted to yell your vulgar language and he didn't want to put up with that, then you weren't sure what you were going to do. You weren't going to say it to his face. And so, I mean, that hits like kind of the opposite end of that yeah, we need to be able to take a moment and step back and be Uncle Bob when he gets angry and go out and, you know, maybe not smoke the cigarette, but take the few minutes to think about our response, take a moment to take a breath, and then respond accordingly.
Right, because you're going to respond differently if you give yourself that moment than you will when you're letting emotion drive everything. One of the things that we're seeing too is just heartbreaking examples of people cheering for the death of other people. We've watched that. And it seems to be just an absolute slap in the face to humanity. And I want to touch real quickly before we get out of time, not too far away in Salt Lake City, Utah, last night, a shooting broke out at a place that you would think would be protected and sacred, a Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saint building. There was a funeral going on inside, and in the parking lot, 2 people ended up dead and 6 others injured. They're saying it's not targeted to the faith, but it is also not random. It stemmed from some kind of a dispute. And you know what? That's something they can't take back. In the heat of the moment, things went too far. What can we do to really prioritize that notion of just taking a step back and letting emotions cool?
Precisely that. You take time. Reaction is seldomly going to have a positive outcome because it's done in the spur of the moment. It is done from the limbic system, which every creature has, and an alligator has that, and they'll eat their own young, right? We have in our development our prefrontal cortex, which allows us to think, cause and effect, and so forth. And so when we take time to back away from a situation, breathe, recenter before reacting, before hitting enter or whatever, that is a response because you have now taken time to think about what the ramifications may be, rather than just simply ramming into it with the fight or flight response.
Right. That fight or flight can really be pretty destructive. For any of you, have you seen examples of people taking a step back and you've been able to witness the positive things that occur? Or have you seen some examples of people allowing emotion to just drive it? Have you had a front row seat for any of that?
I guess I'll go. I've got a little bit of a personal one from several years ago. When my dad was sick with stomach cancer, a lot of my family wasn't there. They didn't want to be around. They didn't want to help out. And here I was, 19, 21 years old, right in there, just trying to deal with watching the degradation of my father without any help as a very young adult. I was his primary caregiver, and when he passed away, I responded or reacted instead of responding to my family. I called them out for the negative behavior. I pushed myself away from them. I made myself the black sheep of the family as a result. And for many years, it was very hard to overcome that. And that was a deep emotional setting for me, something that I wanted to overcome, but I kept holding on to because of the way I had reacted myself in response to what I felt I saw versus acknowledging the greater situation of I was the one that didn't have my family established. I was the one living closest and things like that. And so I feel like for me personally, I could have taken that step back, taken that moment of, hey, wait a minute, you've got your family and you're 40 miles away, and you've got your family and you're 3 hours away, and here I am, I don't have the family, I've got dad, and so that's a personal moment that I can say that I reacted rather than responded.
Such a great example. Did you have one?
Yes, I was thinking of one. Just for me, I think trying to keep an eternal perspective on things, like Meryl was saying, when you're just reacting, it's like the soda that just goes into your bloodstream, then it spikes your sugar, and then you crash, right? It's like, it's not good for you. No more soda. But just being like water, just refreshing, just being cool, being calm, I feel like that's really important. So a little snippet of a story that happened in my family. There was a little falling out that had happened between some family members, and every time I thought, I'm really going to address this. I'm going to put my foot down and say what I want to say, and I tried writing it out in a letter because I know that if I speak angry, it's not going to go well. And so I thought, I know myself, I'm going to write it down. And so I started this letter, and the next day I completely lost it. And I'm like, I don't even know where it was, and I'm moderately organized. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to type it because I can't lose my computer. So I started typing the letter, and then my computer crashed.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, this is probably a sign then. So I waited another month. And then I thought, okay, I don't feel as upset as I did. And the perspective, like the eternal perspective of having this relationship is more important than trying to be right. And so I sent a text of like, let's get together and maybe have lunch, and then we'll start to rebuild this relationship. And now it's really amazing.
Oh, I love
it's such
that.
a different component now in our life.
I love that you have brought it right back around to perspective. Unfortunately, we are out of time, so I want to give you each just 10 seconds to just say a final thought.
Well, we learned in kindergarten to have a timeout when we're having a tantrum. Maybe we should apply in adulthood what we learned in kindergarten.
I think a little bit might stem to the instant gratification that we've become so accustomed to as well. We want things to be resolved in the moment, at the time. And we need to start trusting that we can both parties in any situation can take a step away, take a moment to breathe and relax, and come back to the table with honest conversation.
So true.
For me, I feel like it's really important to remember that we have more in common than we do differences. And so just grounding ourselves and bonding with others and celebrating and rejoicing those similarities will just help us stay connected and more unified.
So true. Meryl.
My thought is forgiveness. Forgiveness is not so much for the other person, it's to help yourself so that you can move on. We so often get stuck in where we're at when we're angry that we don't see the perspective. But if we forgive, it pulls us back from that situation and allows us to move forward, regardless where that may lead us.
So true. The word of the day is perspective. That has the power to make a huge difference. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to Gandolfo's and Classic Interiors, and we'll see you next month.